I'm with Susan Michael from American Christian Leaders for Israel, which is part of the ICEJ USA. Now, Susan, what is the ACLI?
ACLI, the American Christian Leaders for Israel, is a network of Christian leaders that we created and have managed over the years. It's not an organization, it's not another entity. It's just a collaborative banner under which we like to come together with leaders of other organizations and do our advocacy together, because the United States is such a big country and no one organization can really speak to or speak on behalf of the tens of millions of evangelicals in America. So this way, when we unite our voices with other leaders, we really do speak to and on behalf of tens of millions of Christians. So that's why we formed it.
Mm. Now, last year you were celebrating 10 years. Did you do something special for that event?
We did. We had a reception at the annual National Religious Broadcasters Convention. Now, that's like the largest convention of Christian leaders and communicators in the United States. And they were one of the founding members of ACLI. They've been a key and critical partner over the years. And so they hosted a reception to honor our 10th anniversary and to announce to all the leaders there at the convention that ACLI is the Israel advocacy arm for the NRB, and that visibility and that stamp of approval really pushed us into a whole new level of exposure and impact.
The NRB is very, very big in America, isn't it? I've sort of heard of them. So this must be a really great honor to be able to be part with that.
It was, and now I was just added to the board of the NRB. So that also is a great honor to be a part of the leadership of that great organization.
How important is it to have a voice like this in America?
The ACLI voice is critical because in the pro-Israel Christian world, there are many different organizations and ministries. Some of them focused on Israel, some of them are not focused on Israel, but they're very pro-Israel and will speak up. And we really needed to come together in unity because, fragmented as we were, we didn't have much impact. And, you know, politics is about power, and you have influence in politics if you have numbers, and so it's critical that we unite our voices and we show that these are the major evangelical Christians in America taking this stance on this issue. Say if it's against the proliferation of nuclear arms by Iran. We stood out. That was our founding issue, actually, in 2015. That was the first issue we tackled. Since then, we've taken a stance on a number of issues. After October the 7th, we came together and we said, what do we need to do? And first, we did a letter to the president asking for his continued and even greater support of the Jewish community in America. But secondly, we wrote a letter to all the presidents of the universities in the United States, secular universities, so over 300 presidents of universities, as Christian leaders, asking them to adopt a definition of anti-Semitism and enforce it on campus, and to provide greater security for their Jewish students. So that was very powerful coming from Christian leaders. So those are just a few of the examples.
That must be really important, actually doing that for the campuses, because we're seeing so much how Marxism and things are actually getting into the campuses and how students are reacting about what's going on in Israel.
Absolutely. We're currently working with a lot of Christian campuses. Now, they are not as rabid anti-Israel as your secular, especially your Ivy League campuses and all. Our Christian colleges, though, are being impacted by social media. And as you know, there's just a proliferation of lies and false accusations against Israel, also against the Christians that support Israel. And so these Christian students, they hear all kinds of things and they're genuinely confused. And they do want to know the truth, and that's the difference. And so we're beginning to really work more aggressively with Christian campuses to provide resources for those students who really do want to know the truth. And it's very gratifying, I will say.
Now, many Christians who are reading the book of Genesis and supporting Israel and becoming Zionists, but is anti-Zionism now becoming the new anti-Semitism?
Yes, it is. And we have to understand that the face of anti-Semitism, it changes over the generations. We call it, it's like a mutating virus. And whenever you think that that type of anti-Semitism will never appear again, it just has gone dormant and it'll come alive in another generation with a slightly different face. But at the end of the day, it's the same evil force uh, wanting to create the annihilation of the Jewish people. And our message to the Christian world is you have to understand that you also are a target of that evil force. And Christians that support Israel, that are friends of Israel, are now being lied about and attacked just as viciously as the state of Israel is. And so we have to understand this and be prepared to articulate a defense against it.
Are you seeing an attack personally on you with the ACLI as well?
Well, we're seeing it in social media.
Mm.
So if we post something that's in favor of Israel, you wouldn't believe. And you don't even know how many of the messages are coming from a real person and how many of them are just bots. But they seem to look for certain words. And when they see those words, then you'll just get message after message after message. Terrible things, you know, that we support genocide, that we support baby killers. And so that's why it's so important that we learn to defend Israel and the Jewish people against those lies. Then we're able to defend ourselves and not be associated with those lies.
Is it difficult dealing with that? Because I sort of get the feeling myself is, I've seen videos of people, of one person just recently shouting over to Israelis and calling them baby killers. And within their mind, they feel really justified about shouting that because they believe the narrative and believe the lies. Is it really difficult fighting this narrative and dealing with this narrative? Because I think they walk away feeling so righteous because, yeah, we are fighting this. They are baby killers and they are doing this. They are committing genocide.
It's extremely difficult to combat this. And I will say this is a very well-funded campaign. Some of it's actually being conducted by state governments. It's not just, these are not individuals out there just coming up with this. And as I said, sometimes it's just a digital campaign of bots. These aren't even real people,
Mm.
but they've got profiles on social media that make them look like they're a real person. And so the funding and the numbers, you end up diluted by this messaging. And you don't even know it's coming from real people. So, but that influences young people. They see this and they think, well, then this must be the right view because look at all these people that agree with it. And I, who've been around for a long, look at it and say, I don't even know those are real people. But it's very impactful. And without really significant funding and a coordinated campaign, it's impossible to combat this. So we have started through the American Christian Leaders for Israel Network. We've started a social media sharing uh, collaboration where every week we're just putting up some posts and anybody can go in and use them under their own branding, their own identity on social media, just to help a lot of these smaller organizations that don't even have staff for social media. But I'll tell you what we're doing is just a drop in the bucket. And what's needed is a very well-funded campaign coordinated like this. And we've got the network, we've got the desire to do it. But it needs significant funding and great coordination.
Israel's been fighting a war for 2.5 years. Do you feel like you are fighting a war as well with Israel at this time?
Oh, absolutely. We are in the trenches with Israel fighting on the eighth front. Now, Israel was fighting a seven front war that was a military fronts. And of course, we're not involved in that. But the eighth front of this war is in the realm of public perception. And that is where we are. We are definitely in the trenches fighting that war alongside Israel.
Is Israel losing that war, do you think?
Yes,
Yeah.
we have been losing. That doesn't mean that we will lose, but we have been losing on that eighth front. So there's a lot of conversation taking place now. How do we do a better job? How can we join forces? And that's key. We must join forces. No one organization can do it on their own. So we're a part of a lot of conversations like that right now. And I do believe that we can turn this around, but it will take years. What happened in 2 years will now take a decade to undo, but it can be done.
Mm. Are you seeing young evangelicals actually walking away from Israel as well?
We see churches walking away from Israel, and yes, we see young evangelicals walking away. Um, a lot of it, though, is not out of an adamant anti-Israel stance. It could be a fatigue over the combative nature of the issue. It could be confusion that they just don't understand it enough and they're overwhelmed by it. And it could be that they don't quite understand how it's even significant for them. Why is that important to them? I'm out studying to be a doctor, or I'm going to be a lawyer, or why is this so important, and walking away from it? It is an overwhelming battle. But we have found that when we get time with a young evangelical and we help connect this issue to their Bible, you've got them.
Mm.
Because if once that happens, then the light bulbs go off, the dots are connected, and then they understand the significance of it, and many of them become committed to being a lifelong advocate for Israel.
Mm. Now in America, you have strong voices like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson to contend with. Are they doing a lot of damage to the pro-Israel narrative?
They have been doing a lot of damage. Quite honestly, though, they're becoming so radical that I think they're losing the charm that they had at first. They're coming across as really unbalanced. Um, but they've just got so many followers, and they've got such a large presence in the media, in mainly social media platform, but then that carries over. Because of their large presence, they are still having an influence. And the third one, of course, is Nick Fuentes. Nick has a very large following of young evangelical, especially young men. And it's dangerous. It doesn't mean they agree with everything he says, but they are kind of drawn to his style. And there's a big need within young evangelicals that he's tapping into, and so they're listening to him, and that's extremely dangerous.
It's part of the problem today, like social media, things like that, where that's where people are getting their news from, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the news is correct. But also, as well, the news is actually often wrong as well because they have their own narratives.
Yeah, and this is what I tell young people all the time. My heart goes out to them because they're growing up in an age where you cannot believe what you see. The video can be AI generated, it can be doctored, it can be totally false, not at all what the it says that it's portraying. You can't believe images. Images are so easily doctored now. Um, and you can't believe what you're being told because there's just an outright campaign of lies and propaganda. So, how do they know what to believe? That's the really scary thing. And of course, it is you find your trusted sources, you find those you trust. And our organization, the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem, we're one of those trusted sources for young Christians because we've been on the ground in Israel 46 years now. So we know we're there, and we'd be happy to host them so that they could see it for themselves. And that's the second thing I tell them. Number one, find your trusted source. Secondly, is go to Israel and see it for yourself. Do not go by what you're being told. Go see it for yourself and make up your own mind.
Do you bring groups to Israel and take them round so that they can actually meet the various different things here in Israel?
Yeah, absolutely. We take as many groups as we can, and because it's totally life changing. And while they're there in Israel, they get to see Israel today for what it is, meet the people, and that just melts a lot of those lies right there. But secondly, we get to connect them to the land of the Bible. And once they get there, their Bible just comes alive. And that's what happened to me. I was a 19-year-old biblical studies major in university when I first got to go to Israel for a summer study program. Completely changed my life because my Bible came alive.
Mm.
Then Israeli society and Israel became so fascinating to me. And it also came alive. And that's exactly the experience we want to introduce these young people to.
I know that the ICEJ has been doing a lot of work in Kibbutz Be'eri. Are you taking people down to the south as well so that they can see some of the areas where Israel was attacked on October the 7th?
Absolutely. And that is just critical in these days because so many people have been told that, October the 7th was even a lie,
Mm.
or, they have no idea. We meet young people, they don't even know what happened. It's like, why? What happened on October 7th, 2023? So to take them down there and let them see the faces of those young people that were at that Nova Festival that were just mowed down and murdered in place. Let them hear the stories from Kibbutz Be'eri of those that were taken hostage, and to allow them to be a part of rebuilding a devastated community. So it's really critical. We take every group down there.
So the ACLI is amplifying biblical truth. Is this very much needed today?
Yes, I believe that for the Christian world, which let's face it, in the world, there's somewhere around 800 million evangelical Christians. In America, we say there's around 50, 60 million. These numbers are a little loose, but the the truth is there's just hundreds of millions of us, and we are dedicated to the authority of Scripture. So once we are able to share with those hundreds of millions of evangelicals Israel, the significance of Israel in their Bible, we've got them for life. They're going to be an Israel advocate. They're going to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. They're going to be watchmen on the walls of Jerusalem, as Isaiah called us to be. They're going to want to be there as a support and a comfort to even their local Jewish community. That's what we want to see happen, and it all begins in the pages of the Bible.
Mm. Now, some people love him and some people hate him. How important has Donald Trump, the president of the US, been to Israel?
Yeah, Donald Trump, such an electrifying personality. But what's refreshing about him is that he threw political correctness out the window, and he brought a fresh approach to decision making and to policies. And we so desperately needed that. This country is so close to going down the tubes, and so he has helped to turn that around because of his willingness to kick against the goads. And so a lot of people don't like that in him. Um, but there's also great positive things that he's doing, and he certainly has my support.
Mm, mine too. Um, why do you support Israel?
I support Israel because, number one, I understand the significance of Israel and the return of the Jewish people to their ancient homeland as a fulfillment of God's promises to them. And he also promised that he would bless those that bless what he was doing with the children of Israel. And so I've been a lifelong blesser of Israel because of that. But secondly, I understand the geopolitical significance of Israel as an American. I mean, there are so many reasons to support Israel that go beyond the pages of the Bible. And because of all those reasons, I'm a supporter of Israel and have been my entire adult life and will be until my final breath.
And all that support that you have is all Bible based, and we can actually present Bible facts about how God is giving the land and it's an eternal covenant. Whereas replacement theology is just odd scriptures taking out from here and there, and has no real strong Bible root or basis, does it?
No, the scandal of replacement theology, there's really two. One is that it has to either disregard whole portions of scripture or completely spiritualize them so that they actually mean something other than what it says. That's the only way you can make replacement theology work. And that's why it's so dangerous. If you just read the Bible to mean what it says it says, then there's no replacement there. There are some scriptures in the New Testament that you need to understand who is the Apostle Paul actually speaking to, and what was he meaning by that, because we can take it out of context. But the second scandal of replacement theology is what it does to the very character of God, our understanding of the character of God. He becomes a God that had a plan that failed. If you understand his plan that he set forth with Abraham and created the people of Israel, then failed because of their rejection of the messianic credentials of Jesus and the crucifixion of Jesus. What kind of God had a plan that failed? And what kind of God is not faithful and true to his promises? His promises to Abraham were unconditional. So these two reasons I find replacement theology to be very disturbing. And so we speak on this all the time to bring a very clear understanding of the continuity of the Bible, that the story that began in Genesis goes all the way through to Revelation, which means it's still going on today because we haven't seen much of Revelation take place yet. And so that story is still going on. It's one continual story. And God is faithful and true and the same throughout all of it. And so replacement theology really sets up the Bible reader for confusion and major disconnect. And I think walking away from much of the Bible. And that would be very, very sad.
What is your prayer finally for Israel today?
Of course, my prayer is for the peace of Jerusalem, for that day when nations will learn war no more, and that they are going to turn their swords into plowshares. And I know that that may not come tomorrow, that day. And until then, there may be continued difficulty, there may be continued war. But we all pray for that day, because that's the day that Jerusalem is a praise in the earth. The kingdom of God has been established here. It's a kingdom of peace, and we will all be blessed through that. And so that's my prayer for Israel.
What's your website for people who'd like to know more about the work that you do?
Well, our website is the ICEJUSA.org, and the website for our leadership network is ACLFORIsrael.com.
Well, Susan, thank you very much for sharing today.
Thank you, Paul. Great to be with you.